I was working the overnight shift at a small radio station just outside of Cedar Falls, Iowa. KNX was one of those tiny AM stations that played classic country and farm reports, the kind of place where the overnight DJ was more of a watchman than an entertainer. The studio sat on the second floor of an old brick building downtown, with windows that looked out over empty streets, and the grain elevator silhouetted against whatever stars managed to pierce through the light pollution. My name's David, and I'd been doing the midnight to 6 shift for about 8 months. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and gave me plenty of time to read between weather updates and the occasional late-night dedication. Most nights were quiet and predictable. I'd spin records, read the agricultural reports, and watch the clock crawl towards sunrise. But that Tuesday night in October was different. The air felt heavy, charged, like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, except the weather service had called for clear skies. I remember checking the barometric pressure readings twice, thinking our equipment was malfunctioning. Everything showed normal, but something felt off. Around 2:30 in the morning, I was queuing up a Hank Williams record when the phone rang. It wasn't unusual for people to call the station at odd hours, drunk farmers wanting to hear their favorite song, or insomniacs looking for someone to talk to. I picked up on the third ring. WKNX, you're listening to the overnight show with David. Static. Then a voice, but not quite right. The words were English, but the cadence was off, like someone reading phonetically from a script they didn't understand. We need to speak with someone in authority. The line was crystal clear. No background noise, no typical phone line hiss. Too clear, if that makes sense. I'm sorry. Who is this? We are attempting to establish communication protocols. Your transmission frequencies have been noted. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. This wasn't a prank call. The voice had an odd quality to it, almost mechanical, but with subtle inflections that seemed deliberate. Sir, this is just a radio station. If you're looking for someone official, you might want to try the sheriff's department or... No. Your broadcast signal reaches approximately 47,000 humans nightly. This is sufficient. My hand was trembling as I reached for the pen to take notes. 47,000. That was exactly our estimated listening area. Information that wasn't public. Information you'd only know if you had access to our FCC filings or if you'd been monitoring our signal strength. What do you want to communicate? There was a pause, and in that pause, I could hear something in the background. Not voices exactly, but a low harmonic hum, like the sound of wind through a massive cavern. Your species has reached a threshold. Certain individuals among you have developed sensitivities that allow for limited contact. We have been observing. We wish to prepare you. I was fully alert now, adrenaline coursing through me. Part of me wanted to hang up, but something kept me on the line. The voice was calm and patient, and there was an authority to it that commanded attention. Prepare us for what? Integration. Your world is not isolated. It never has been, but your awareness is expanding. Some of you are beginning to see through the barriers that have long separated our realities. The studio felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were pressing in. I glanced at the clock. 2:47 a.m., the witching hour, some called it, when the veil between worlds grew thin. Who are you? We are observers, guardians in your terms. We have walked among you for millennia, guiding when necessary, protecting when required, but recent developments have accelerated the timeline. I thought about all the strange reports I'd been hearing lately. Farmers talking about lights over their fields, truckers describing objects that moved in impossible ways, people calling in with stories they were too embarrassed to tell anyone else. The people calling the station, I said, understanding flooding through me. The ones with stories about strange encounters. You're saying those are real? Many are authentic contact events. Your species is developing the capacity to perceive us more directly. This creates both opportunity and risk. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Outside, the street was empty, but I had the distinct feeling of being watched. Why are you telling me this? Because you have influence. Your voice reaches thousands each night. They trust you. When the time comes, they will need someone to help them understand. Understand what? That you are not alone, that you never have been, and that the future your species chooses in the coming years will determine whether this revelation brings unity or chaos. The line went quiet, but I could still sense a presence on the other end. How will I know when this time comes? You will know. The signs are already appearing. More sightings, more contact events, more individuals developing. The old radio crackled to life in David's makeshift studio, casting its familiar amber glow across the darkened room. 3 days had passed since the call that changed everything. 3 days since a voice from beyond the static had spoken his name and warned him of humanity's emerging sensitivity. 3 days since he'd found that strange device displaying coordinates and contact schedules. David adjusted his headset and leaned into the microphone. The device sat before him on the console, its surface still dark, but somehow alive, waiting. He'd tried everything, pressing it, shaking it, even taking it apart. But the moment his fingers touched the seam, it had sealed itself shut again, as if it knew he wasn't ready. Good evening, night owls. This is David Chen coming to you live from KQED, where the strange becomes familiar and the impossible feels like home. His voice carried the weight of recent events, though he tried to keep it steady. Tonight, we're talking about contact. Not the kind Hollywood sells you, but the quiet kind, the kind that slips into your life like morning fog. The first caller came through just after midnight. David, is this really David Chen? That's me. What's on your mind tonight? I don't know if I should be calling, but after what you said the other night, about being ready, about things changing. The caller's voice was young, female, nervous. My name is Sarah. I'm a nurse at Mercy General, and something happened during my shift 3 nights ago. David felt his pulse quicken. 3 nights ago, the same night as his call. Go ahead, Sarah. You're safe here. I was working the ICU. It was around 2 a.m., really quiet. I was checking on Mr. Rodriguez in room 314 when all the monitors just stopped. Not alarms, not flatlines. They just went silent. Every machine in the unit. David glanced at the device. Still dark, but he could swear it was listening. The silence lasted maybe 30 seconds, Sarah continued. But during that time, I felt watched, like something was moving through the ward, checking on people. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Gentle, almost caring. When the machines came back online, Mr. Rodriguez's vitals had improved dramatically. His cancer markers dropped by 60% overnight. Did anyone else notice? That's the thing. I asked around, but nobody else remembered the silence. The other nurses, the doctors, even the security footage from that time is just missing. 30 seconds. Gone. David's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the device. The moment his fingers touched its surface, it flared to life. Symbols cascaded across its screen. Not the coordinates from before, but something else. A map of the city with dozens of blinking points scattered across it. Sarah, David said carefully, what part of the city is Mercy General in? Downtown, corner of 5th and Morrison. Why? David stared at the screen. One of the blinking points sat exactly where Mercy General would be. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. You're not alone in this. The next caller was already waiting. David, this is Marcus. I drive for the city bus system, and I had something happen the same night your caller is talking about. Tell me. I was driving the late route through the warehouse district. Empty bus, just me and the road. Around 2:15, every streetlight on my route went out. Not blown, not flickering, just off. But there was still light somehow, like the air itself was glowing. David watched more points light up on the device's screen. The warehouse district, the riverside, the university campus. I pulled over, Marcus continued, and that's when I saw them. 3 figures walking between the warehouses. Tall, moving too smoothly to be human. They weren't walking toward anything specific, just observing, like they were taking inventory. Did they notice you? One of them stopped and looked right at the bus. I couldn't see its face clearly, but I felt recognition. Not threatening, just acknowledgement. Like it was saying, "We see you, and that's okay." Then the streetlights came back on, and they were gone. The device showed 47 active points now, scattered across the city like a constellation. David realized he was looking at a map of contact events, all from the same night. All from people who were just now finding the courage to speak. The calls kept coming. Elena, a librarian, described finding books rearranged in perfect geometric patterns when she opened the downtown branch that morning. The books spelled out messages in languages that didn't exist, but somehow conveyed meaning directly to the mind. Preparation begins with awareness. Dr. James Kim called about his observatory outside the city. His equipment had detected unusual electromagnetic signatures that night, patterns that seemed almost linguistic in their complexity. When he'd tried to record them, his instruments had displayed readings that defied physics: negative energy, time distortions, gravitational anomalies that lasted exactly 30 seconds each. Mrs. Chen, no relation, she assured him, had been walking her dog when every streetlight in her neighborhood had dimmed to exactly half brightness. In that subdued illumination, she'd seen her own shadow moving independently, reaching out to touch the shadows of trees and buildings, as if gathering information. With each call, more points appeared on the device. David began to see the pattern, a grid spreading across the city, with contact events forming a perfect geometric shape. It wasn't random, it was systematic, methodical. A survey. "We're going to take a short break," David announced, though he knew the calls would keep coming. During the break, he studied the device more carefully. The points weren't just marking locations, they were connected by thin lines that pulsed with soft light. The network they formed looked almost organic, like neural pathways in a vast brain. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're doing well. They're ready to listen. The preparation continues tonight. Check your roof at 3:17 a.m. David stared at the message, the same number that had called him 3 nights ago. When he returned to the air, the calls had taken on a different quality. People weren't just reporting strange events anymore. They were describing changes in themselves, enhanced intuition, dreams that felt like memories, a growing sense that the world was larger and more connected than they'd ever imagined. "David," said a caller named Robert, "I run a small electronics shop downtown. Since that night, I've been able to fix things without understanding how. Circuits that should be fried just respond to my touch. And I keep hearing whispers in radio static, like someone's trying to tune in from very far away." "What do the whispers say?" "That's just it. I don't hear words. I hear concepts, ideas about connection, about preparation, about humanity taking its next step." The device's screen had changed again. The points were now connected in a complex web that extended beyond the city limits. David realized he was looking at a network that spanned the entire region, possibly the continent. Each node represented someone who had been touched by the phenomenon, someone whose consciousness had been quietly expanded. As the show neared its end, David made a decision that would change everything. "Friends," he said into the microphone, "I need to tell you something. 3 nights ago, I received a call that I initially thought was a prank. Someone claiming to be an observer, warning me about changes coming to humanity. They told me that some of us are becoming more sensitive, more aware. They said I should share stories of contact." He paused, looking at the device. The network of points was pulsing now, synchronized like a heartbeat. "Since then, I've been given access to information that suggests we're not just having random encounters. We're being prepared for something. Gradually, gently, but deliberately. Tonight's calls aren't coincidences. They're evidence of a coordinated effort to expand human consciousness. The phone lines exploded. Every light on his console flashed as calls flooded in. I know how this sounds, David continued, but look at the pattern. Same night, same time, across the entire city. This isn't invasion or abduction. This is education. Someone, or something, is trying to help us evolve. At exactly 3:17 a.m., as the show ended and David climbed to the station's roof, he found he wasn't alone. Scattered across the city's rooftops and balconies, dozens of people stood looking up at the sky. He could see them in the distance, silhouetted against the urban glow. Above them, barely visible against the stars, shapes moved in perfect formation. Not craft exactly, but presences, observers, watchers, who had decided that humanity was ready for the next phase of contact. The device in David's pocket hummed softly, its screen now showing a single message. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Thank you for your service. As he watched, more people emerged onto rooftops across the city. They were all holding devices identical to his, all looking up at the same sky. The network was complete, and the real work was about to begin. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackled to life with David's voice, now broadcasting on frequencies that didn't officially exist. Good morning, awakening minds. This is David Chen, and welcome to the next stage of human evolution. The watchers had found their voices. Now it was time to find their purpose. The old lighthouse keeper's logbook sat heavy in my hands, its leather binding cracked and weathered by decades of salt air. I was cleaning out the automated station when I found it, tucked behind a loose panel in what used to be the keeper's quarters. The final entries, dated just before the lighthouse was decommissioned in 1987, caught my attention immediately. October 15th, 1987. They've been coming more frequently now, 3 times this week alone, always during the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. watch. The light seems to call to them, or maybe they're drawn to something else entirely. Maritime Patrol won't believe the reports anymore. They think old Frank is losing his mind. I flipped through the pages, my coffee growing cold as I read entry after entry describing strange lights over the water, objects that moved unlike any aircraft, and beings that Frank claimed to have observed through his telescope. The man had been alone on this rock for 30 years, keeping ships safe with his beacon. His handwriting was steady, methodical. These weren't the ravings of a lonely man. November 3rd, 1987. Saw one up close tonight. Engine trouble brought me down to the dock around midnight to check the generator. That's when I noticed the water glowing. Not phosphorescence. Something else. The whole bay lit up like someone had dropped the aurora into the sea. I paused, looking out the window at the very bay Frank had described. The water was calm tonight, reflecting the stars in perfect stillness. The craft rose slowly from the water. No sound, no turbulence. Just this smooth, silent ascent. It hovered maybe 50 feet above the surface, dripping seawater that sparkled as it fell. I grabbed my binoculars and got a clear look. The hull was seamless, organic looking, like it had been grown rather than built. And the lights, they pulsed in patterns, not random, intentional, like they were trying to communicate. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the page. Frank's writing became more urgent here, less careful. I flashed the lighthouse beam. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought they were in distress. The craft responded immediately. The same pattern, reflected in those pulsing lights on its hull. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Then it began a new sequence. I wrote it down. Long, short, long, long, short, short, long. I grabbed a pen and paper, copying down Frank's notation. Morse code. I still remembered enough from my Coast Guard days to translate it slowly. LOST. Lost. They were lost, I whispered to the empty room. The logbook continued. I signaled back, HERE. Here, I am here. The craft moved closer, stopping just beyond the rocky shoals. That's when I saw them clearly. 3 figures visible through what I can only call windows, though they seemed more like transparent sections of the hull itself. They were tall, thin, with large heads and eyes that reflected my lighthouse beam like mirrors. They weren't threatening. If anything, they seemed curious. Grateful, maybe. Frank's next entry was dated a week later. November 10th, 1987. They've been coming every night now. Always the same routine. They rise from the water, signal their presence, and wait. I've started leaving coordinates for them. Safe harbors along the coast, places where they won't be seen. Tonight, I gave them the location of the abandoned cove near Widow's Point. Deep water, hidden from the shipping lanes. They seemed to understand. I knew Widow's Point. It was about 20 miles south, accessible only by boat or a treacherous hike down cliff faces. Local fishermen avoided it, claiming the waters were cursed. Maybe they'd been sensing something else entirely. November 18th, 1987. Final entry. The Coast Guard is decommissioning the lighthouse next month. Automated systems, they say. More efficient. They don't understand what they're doing. This beacon isn't just for ships anymore. It's become something else. A guiding light for travelers from much farther away. The page was stained, as if tears had fallen on the ink. I've taught them our navigation systems, shown them our charts. In return, they've shown me things. Maps of the ocean floor that go deeper than we've ever imagined. Cities down there, old and vast and empty now. They're not invaders, they're refugees. Their world is dying, drowning. The water calls to them, because water means life where they come from. My hands shook as I read Frank's final words. Whoever finds this, please understand. They mean no harm. They're just looking for a place to rest, to hide, to survive. The ocean is vast enough for all of us. I've left charts in the hidden compartment behind the radio. Coordinates they gave me. Safe places where they gather. Don't disturb them. Don't hunt them. Just let them be. The universe is bigger and lonelier than we know. Sometimes the lost just need someone to light the way home. I sat in the growing darkness, the logbook closed in my lap. Outside, the automated beacon continued its endless rotation, casting its beam across the water. But it was different now, colder, mechanical. There was no human hand guiding it anymore, no compassionate soul watching for travelers in distress. A movement on the water caught my eye. At first I thought it was a whale surfacing, but the shape was wrong. Too angular, too purposeful. A faint glow emanated from beneath the waves, growing brighter as it rose. I rushed to the lamp room and found the manual override for the beacon. The automated system resisted at first, but eventually I managed to wrest control. I aimed the powerful beam toward the emerging craft and began signaling. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The response came immediately. The same pattern, pulsed back in gentle blue light from the vessel's hull. Then, another sequence. THANKYOU. I smiled, tears streaming down my face as I replied, WELCOME. For the next hour, I guided 3 more craft to safety, directing them toward the coordinates Frank had left behind. Each one signaled their gratitude before disappearing into the depths. As the last one submerged, I felt a profound sense of completion, as if I'd fulfilled a duty I never knew I'd inherited. The lighthouse may have been automated, but its true purpose lived on. Sometimes the most important journeys happen in the spaces between worlds, guided by nothing more than compassion and the simple act of lighting the way for the lost. I returned the logbook to its hiding place, but not before adding my own entry. October 23rd, 2023. The light still shines. The watch continues. They are not alone. As dawn broke over the water, I realized that Frank's final gift wasn't just the knowledge he'd shared. It was the reminder that in a vast and often indifferent universe, the simple act of caring for strangers can become the most profound form of contact we'll ever know. I was driving back from a late shift at the plant, somewhere around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The roads were empty, except for the occasional semi-hauling freight through the darkness. I'd taken Highway 287 north toward home, a route I'd driven hundreds of times. Nothing special about it, just 2 lanes cutting through farmland and scattered trees. About 20 miles out from town, my headlights caught something moving in the field to my right. At first I thought it was cattle, or maybe a deer, but the movement was wrong. Too deliberate, too coordinated. I slowed down and pulled over to the shoulder, leaving the engine running. There were lights in the field, not flashlights or work lights, but something else entirely. 7 or 8 of them, arranged in a loose circle maybe 100 yards from the road. They pulsed slowly, shifting from white to blue to a soft green. Each pulse was synchronized, like they were breathing together. I grabbed my phone to record it, but the screen flickered and went black. Dead battery, even though it had been at 60% when I left work. I tried the radio instead, thinking maybe there was news about some kind of military exercise or weather phenomenon. Nothing but static. The lights began to move, not randomly, but in a pattern. They would drift apart, then come back together, always maintaining that slow, rhythmic pulse. As I watched, they started to rise, not all at once, but one by one, lifting off the ground and hovering about 20 feet in the air. That's when I noticed the silence. No wind through the wheat, no insects, no distant highway noise. Even my truck's engine seemed muffled, like the sound was being absorbed by something invisible. One of the lights detached from the group and drifted toward the road, toward me. I thought about getting back in the truck and driving away, but something kept me there. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear. The light approached slowly, stopping about 50 feet away from where I stood. Up close, it wasn't just a light. There was a shape behind the glow, smooth, metallic, about the size of a washing machine, but hovering effortlessly. No visible propulsion, no sound except for a barely perceptible hum that I felt more than heard. We watched each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Then, without warning, it shot straight up into the sky. The other lights followed, one by one, until they were just pinpricks against the stars. Then they were gone. I stood there for a long time after, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The normal sounds of the night gradually returned. Wind in the wheat, distant traffic, the idle of my truck's engine. When I finally got back on the road, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those lights following me. I worked the graveyard shift at a small manufacturing plant outside Topeka. It's quiet work, monitoring equipment, doing safety checks, making sure everything runs smooth while the day crew sleeps. I like the solitude, always have. But that night in March changed how I think about being alone. It was around 3 a.m. when I stepped outside for a cigarette break. The plant sits in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by empty fields and a few scattered farmhouses. No city lights, just darkness and stars. I was leaning against the loading dock when I noticed something off about the horizon. There was a glow. Faint at first, like the sun coming up, but it was the wrong direction and the wrong color. Too orange, too warm, and it was moving. Not fast, but definitely moving, drifting from east to west, about a mile out. I stubbed out my cigarette and watched. The glow got brighter, and I could see it had a shape, oval, maybe 30 feet across, hovering about 50 feet off the ground. It moved with purpose, following the tree line that bordered the creek. I thought about calling someone, but who? The sheriff? My supervisor? What would I say? Instead, I just watched as it glided silently across the landscape. No sound, no trail, just that warm orange glow cutting through the darkness. As it passed directly in front of the plant, it stopped, just hung there in the air, pulsing gently. I felt exposed standing under the loading dock lights, like I was on stage and it was the audience. The sensation was unsettling, but not threatening, more like being noticed. After maybe 10 minutes, it resumed its westward drift, eventually disappearing behind a stand of trees near the old Hendricks farm. The night went back to normal. Cricket songs, distant train whistle, the hum of machinery inside the plant. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had taken note of our little operation out here in the middle of nowhere. I finished my shift and drove home as the sun came up. I didn't mention it to anyone on the day crew when they arrived. What was I going to say? But over the next few weeks, I found myself stepping outside more often during my breaks, scanning the horizon. It never came back, at least not while I was watching. Sometimes I wonder if it was checking on us, monitoring our little industrial outpost, cataloguing what we do out here in the dark. The thought doesn't scare me anymore. If anything, it's oddly comforting to think that someone or something is paying attention, keeping tabs on this small corner of the world while the rest of it sleeps. I woke up because something was wrong with the air in my bedroom. It felt thick, almost syrupy, like trying to breathe through wet cotton. The digital clock next to my bed read 3:17 a.m., but the numbers seemed to flicker, pulsing between bright and dim in a rhythm that made my eyes water. My dog Rusty was sitting perfectly still at the foot of the bed, staring at the window, not moving, not panting, just frozen like a statue. His ears were up, but he wasn't making a sound. That wasn't like him. Rusty barked at everything, delivery trucks, squirrels, his own shadow sometimes. But now he was silent, locked in place like someone had hit pause on him. I sat up slowly, trying not to make any noise. The air pressure in the room felt different, heavier, like being underwater. My ears popped twice, and I tasted something metallic on my tongue. Through the window, I could see my neighbor's porch light flickering in the same rhythm as my clock. Then, Mrs. Henderson's light started doing it too. Then the street light at the corner. That's when I noticed the humming. It was so low I felt it more than heard it, vibrating through the floorboards and up into my chest, like standing too close to a massive generator. But there was no generator. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, the walls, the ceiling, even the air itself. I got out of bed and walked to the window. Rusty still hadn't moved. Outside, the street looked normal, except for the flickering lights. No cars, no people, just the usual suburban quiet. But something was off about the shadows. They were too long, stretching in the wrong directions, like the light was coming from above instead of the street lamps. I looked up. There was something hanging in the sky above my neighborhood. Not flying, just suspended there like it was painted on the darkness. It was huge, maybe the size of a football field, but its edges were blurred, shifting like heat waves. The shape reminded me of a jellyfish, all flowing curves and translucent surfaces that seemed to bend the starlight around them. It wasn't making any noise that I could hear, but the humming was definitely coming from its direction. The whole thing pulsed gently, expanding and contracting like it was breathing. Each pulse made the streetlights flicker in unison. I grabbed my phone to take a picture, but the screen was black. Not dead. Black. Like someone had painted over it with dark paint. I pressed the power button, held it down, tried everything, but it stayed black. The clock next to my bed was still flickering, but my phone was just gone. That's when I noticed other people. They were standing in their yards, perfectly still, looking up. Mr. Garcia from across the street was on his lawn in his pajamas, arms at his sides, face tilted toward the sky. The Johnsons were in their driveway, both parents and their teenage daughter, all frozen in the same position. Nobody was moving. Nobody was talking. I wanted to call out to them, but something stopped me. some instinct that told me to stay quiet, stay hidden. I ducked behind the curtain and watched. The thing in the sky pulsed brighter, and suddenly every person outside took a step forward, all at the same time, like they were connected. Another pulse, another step. They were walking toward the center of the neighborhood in perfect synchronization, their movements mechanical and strange. I looked back at Rusty. He was still sitting at the foot of my bed, but now his head was tilted up at the ceiling, following something I couldn't see. His eyes were wider than normal, reflecting light that wasn't coming from anywhere in the room. The humming grew louder, and I felt something pulling at the back of my mind. Not painful, just insistent, like someone gently trying to get my attention. Images flashed behind my eyes, not my memories, but something else. Vast spaces filled with soft light, corridors that curved in impossible directions, faces that weren't quite human, but weren't threatening either. I shook my head, trying to clear it, but the images kept coming. I saw the neighborhood from above, all the houses laid out like a map. I saw the people walking toward the park at the end of our street, moving in that same synchronized pattern. And I saw myself, standing at my window, being watched by something that existed just outside my perception. The pulling sensation in my mind got stronger. Part of me wanted to go outside, to join the others walking toward the park. It would be easy. Just open the front door and step into the night. Let whatever was happening wash over me like warm water. But I didn't. Instead, I closed my eyes and thought about my grandmother's voice, about the smell of her kitchen, about anything that felt solid and real and mine. The pulling sensation faded, and when I opened my eyes again, the thing in the sky was moving. It drifted slowly over the houses, following the path the people had taken toward the park. As it moved, the streetlights stopped flickering and returned to normal. The humming grew fainter. The air in my room began to feel normal again. Rusty blinked, shook his head, and looked around like he was waking up from a dream. He trotted over to me and pressed against my legs, whimpering softly. I watched through the window as the object disappeared beyond the trees at the park. A few minutes later, I saw the neighbors walking back to their houses. Their movements were normal now, but they looked confused, like they weren't sure how they'd ended up outside in their pajamas. My phone screen flickered and came back to life. The time read 3:42 a.m. According to the phone, only 25 minutes had passed, but it felt like hours. I never told anyone what I saw that night. Who would believe it? Mrs. Henderson mentioned the next day that she'd had trouble sleeping, said she'd had the strangest dreams about walking through her neighborhood. Mr. Garcia said his motion sensor lights had been acting up. The Johnsons' daughter posted on social media about weird dreams where she was floating, but nobody remembered standing in their yards. Nobody remembered walking toward the park. I still live in the same house, and sometimes on clear nights I look up at the sky above the neighborhood. I've never seen the jellyfish-shaped object again, but occasionally the streetlights will flicker in that same synchronized pattern. When that happens, Rusty comes and sits next to me, and we watch the sky together. I don't know what they wanted that night. I don't know why they let me remember when everyone else forgot. But I know they're still out there, somewhere beyond the stars, patient and quiet. And sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, I can still feel that gentle pulling at the back of my mind, like an invitation written in a language I don't quite understand. But I'm not ready to accept it. Not yet. Maybe someday I will be. I was installing a new security system at this old warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix when everything went sideways. The job was supposed to be routine, just running cable through the building and mounting cameras around the perimeter. I'd done hundreds of these installations before, mostly for small businesses looking to upgrade their surveillance. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me busy. The warehouse had been empty for months, one of those industrial buildings that gets passed around between owners who can't figure out what to do with it.
The inside was dusty and hollow, with concrete floors and high ceilings supported by steel beams. Perfect acoustics for every little sound to echo around like you're in a cathedral. I was working alone that day, which wasn't unusual. My partner Jake had called in sick, and the client wanted the system up and running by the weekend. I figured I could knock it out in a day if I started early and pushed through without too many breaks. Around noon, I was up on a ladder installing a camera near the loading dock when I heard something that made me pause. It was a low humming sound, almost like a generator running somewhere in the building. I climbed down and listened, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The warehouse was supposed to be completely empty, no power except for the temporary line I'd run for my tools. I followed the sound toward the back of the building, past rows of empty shelving, and through a maze of support columns. The humming got louder as I walked, but it didn't seem to be coming from any particular direction. It was just everywhere, vibrating through the walls and floor, like the building itself was making the noise. That's when I saw the light. It was coming from underneath a door at the far end of the warehouse, a soft blue glow that pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat. I'd been in that room earlier, when I was mapping out the camera locations, and it had been completely dark. There was no electrical service back there, no reason for any kind of light. I approached the door cautiously, my hand hovering over the handle. The humming was much louder now, and I could feel it in my chest, like standing too close to a massive speaker. The light underneath the door grew brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again in a steady rhythm. When I opened the door, I froze. The room was filled with a blue, ethereal glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In the center of the space, about 6 feet off the ground, was a perfect sphere of light, roughly the size of a basketball. It rotated slowly, casting shifting shadows on the walls as geometric patterns moved across its surface. But that wasn't the strangest part. Standing around the sphere were 3 figures. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with elongated limbs and smooth, pale skin that seemed to shimmer in the blue light. Their heads were larger than human proportions would suggest, and their eyes were completely black, like looking into deep water at night.
They weren't looking at the sphere. They were looking at me. I don't know how long I stood there, probably only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. The figures didn't move, didn't speak, just observed me with those dark, endless eyes. The humming continued, and I realized it wasn't mechanical at all. It was coming from them, or from the sphere, or maybe from the air itself. One of them tilted its head slightly, and I felt something brush against my mind. Not words, not thoughts exactly, but impressions. Images flashed through my consciousness, vast spaces between stars, cities of light, beings of pure energy moving through dimensions I couldn't comprehend. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The blue light faded, the humming ceased, and the figures simply weren't there anymore. Not vanished, not moved away, just gone. The sphere was gone too, leaving behind only the empty room and the faint scent of ozone in the air. I backed away from the doorway, my hands shaking as I reached for my phone. But when I tried to turn it on, the screen was completely black. Dead. The battery had been full when I started work that morning. I gathered my tools as quickly as I could and left the warehouse. I never finished the installation, never went back to collect the rest of my equipment. When the client called asking about the delay, I told him there had been complications with the electrical system and referred him to another contractor. The next day, I drove past the warehouse on my way to another job. There was a "for lease" sign in the window and no indication that anyone had been there recently. But as I slowed down to look, I could swear I saw a faint blue glow emanating from somewhere deep inside the building. I didn't stop to investigate. That night, my phone started working again. The battery showed full charge, and all my apps were functioning normally. But buried in my photo gallery
was a single image I didn't remember taking, a blurry shot of a blue sphere surrounded by tall, shadowy figures. I stared at that photo for a long time, zooming in on details I wasn't sure I wanted to see clearly. Eventually, I deleted it. Some things, I decided, weren't meant to be documented, but I kept the memory, and sometimes, when I'm working in empty buildings or walking through quiet spaces, I listen for that humming sound. Part of me hopes I never hear it again. Another part of me wonders what would have happened if I'd stayed longer, if I'd tried to communicate back. I never found out who owned that warehouse or what happened to it afterward. The building is still there, still empty as far as I know. But sometimes, driving past it late at night, I catch a glimpse of blue light flickering in the windows. I don't slow down anymore. The forest around me felt different somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath. I'd been camping alone for years, and I thought I knew these woods well. But that night, something had shifted. The usual sounds were muted, wrapped in an unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. I was maybe an hour into my evening hike when I first noticed it. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was complete. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. Even the wind had stopped. My dog Luna, a scrappy border collie mix, had been trotting ahead of me, nose to the ground, but now she stood frozen on the trail, every muscle tense. That's when I saw the lights. They weren't like anything I'd ever seen before. 5 orbs, maybe 6, floating just above the tree line about 100 yards ahead. They pulsed with a soft, rhythmic glow, cycling through colors that seemed to bend around the edges, blue shifting to green, then to something I couldn't name. The light didn't behave right. It didn't cast shadows or illuminate the trees beneath it. It just existed, hanging there like someone had painted it onto the darkness. Luna whimpered and pressed against my legs. I reached down to touch her head, and her fur was standing on end. She'd never acted like this before, not even during thunderstorms. The orbs began to move, not randomly, but with purpose, arranging themselves into a perfect triangle. Then they started to rotate, slowly, maintaining that geometric precision as they turned. I found myself counting the rotations without meaning to, one complete turn every 30 seconds, like clockwork. I pulled out my phone to record what I was seeing, but the screen wouldn't respond. The battery showed full, but nothing worked. The camera app wouldn't open. The flashlight wouldn't turn on. It was as if the device had simply shut down, even though it appeared to be functioning. The lights began to descend. They moved as one unit, that perfect triangle dropping toward the forest floor with fluid grace. No sound, no disturbance of the air, just silent movement that defied everything I understood about physics. As they got closer, I could see they weren't solid objects. They were more like windows into somewhere else, portals of light that seemed to have depth without substance. Luna bolted. She tore back down the trail, faster than I'd ever seen her run. I called after her, but my voice sounded muffled, like I was speaking underwater. The lights had reached the ground now, settling among the trees maybe 50 feet away. Up close, I could see they weren't touching the forest floor. They hovered just inches above the pine needles, casting no glow on the earth beneath them. That's when I heard the humming. It started low, almost below the threshold of hearing, more felt than heard. A vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once, the ground, the air, inside my own chest. The sound had layers to it, harmonics that wove together into something that was almost musical, but utterly alien. I should have run. Every instinct told me to follow Luna back to the campsite, to pack up and leave. But I couldn't move. Not because I was paralyzed by fear, but because something about the scene held me transfixed. There was a beauty to it, a terrible, otherworldly beauty that I couldn't turn away from. The lights began to pulse in unison with the humming. Faster now, more urgent. The colors shifted and swirled, and for a moment I thought I saw shapes within them, tall, slender silhouettes that might have been figures. but every time I tried to focus on them, they dissolved back into pure light. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The humming cut off. The lights went dark. The forest was plunged into ordinary darkness, and suddenly all the normal sounds rushed back in. Wind through the trees, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. My phone flickered back to life, the screen blazing bright in the sudden darkness. I stood there for several minutes, heart pounding, waiting for something else to happen. But the forest had returned to normal. When I finally worked up the courage to approach the spot where the lights had been, I found nothing. No scorched earth, no unusual markings, no sign that anything extraordinary had occurred. But the trees were different. I couldn't put my finger on exactly how, but something about them had changed. They seemed to lean inward slightly, as if they were listening. The bark on several of the larger pines had a strange sheen to it, almost metallic in the moonlight. And there was a smell in the air, ozone, like the aftermath of lightning, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. I found Luna back at the campsite, hiding inside my tent. She was shivering, and it took me a long time to coax her out. When she finally emerged, she kept looking back toward the forest, ears pricked, as if she could still hear something I couldn't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the dying fire, listening to the woods around me, waiting for the humming to return. It never did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, just beyond the edge of my perception. In the morning, I packed up quickly and hiked back to my truck. As I loaded my gear, I noticed something odd. My watch, which I always kept synchronized with my phone, was running 3 minutes slow. I'd only been gone for 2 days, and it was a good watch. It shouldn't have lost time like that. The drive home was uneventful, but I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see those lights following me down the mountain roads. They never appeared, but the feeling of being watched persisted for days afterward. I've been back to those woods since, but never alone. The trees still have that strange inward lean, and sometimes, on very still nights, I think I can hear the faintest echo of that humming carried on the wind. Luna refuses to go anywhere near that part of the forest. She'll start whining and pulling on her leash the moment we approach the trail. I've tried to research what I might have seen. Aurora activity, ball lightning, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. Nothing fits exactly. The lights I witnessed didn't behave like any natural occurrence I can find documented. They moved with too much purpose, too much intelligence. Sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, those impossible orbs of light, waiting in the spaces between the trees, humming their alien harmonies to an empty forest. Part of me hopes I never see them again. But another part of me, the part that was transfixed by their terrible beauty, finds itself drawn back to those woods again and again. Because once you've seen something that shouldn't exist, that challenges everything you thought you knew about the world, it becomes impossible to simply forget. The memory burns itself into you, changing the way you look at shadows, at the play of light through leaves, at the vast darkness that lies beyond the reach of our campfires. The universe, I learned that night, is far stranger and more wonderful than we dare to imagine. And sometimes, if we're very quiet and very still, it reveals just a glimpse of its mysteries to those willing to witness them, even if we can never fully understand what we've seen. I was working the night shift at the ranger station in Shoshone National Forest when the calls started coming in. It was mid-October, crisp and clear, the kind of night where the stars felt close enough to touch. I'd been manning the emergency radio for about 3 years by then, mostly dealing with lost hikers or campers who'd run out of supplies. Nothing too dramatic, just quiet work in a quiet place. The first call came in around 11:30 p.m. A family camping near the north entrance reported seeing lights moving through the trees. Not flashlights, they said. Something else. The lights were too bright, too steady, and they moved in perfect formation, like they were connected by invisible strings. I logged the report
and told them to stay in their tent and keep their radio on. Probably just aircraft, I said, though I knew the flight patterns in that area, and nothing was scheduled. 20 minutes later, another call. A different campsite, about 5 miles east of the first one. Same description. Bright lights, moving in formation, completely silent. This time it was a solo hiker, and his voice was shaky. He said the lights had stopped directly overhead for maybe 10 minutes, just hovering, before drifting away toward the mountains. I could hear the fear in his voice, the way people sound when they've seen something that doesn't fit. By midnight, I'd received 7 more calls, all describing the same thing. Lights in the forest, moving with purpose, completely silent. The locations were scattered across nearly 20 square miles, but the descriptions were identical, too identical for coincidence. I started marking each report on the map, and a pattern emerged. The sightings formed a rough circle around the old mining area near Copper Ridge, a place that had been abandoned since the 1940s. I'd been out to Copper Ridge a few times over the years. It was remote, accessible only by an old logging road that hadn't been maintained in decades. The mine shafts were sealed, the buildings long since collapsed. Nothing there but rusted equipment and memories. But tonight, something was drawing attention to that forgotten corner of the forest. Around 12:45, the radio crackled again. This time it was different. The voice was barely a whisper, like the caller was afraid of being overheard. "Ranger Station, this is Campsite 12. They're here. They're right here." The transmission cut to static. I tried to raise them again, but nothing came back. Campsite 12 was less than a mile from Copper Ridge. I grabbed my gear and headed out. Protocol said I should call for backup, but the nearest law enforcement was 40 minutes away, and I didn't want to wait. I told myself I was just checking on campers, making sure everyone was safe. But deep down, I knew I was heading towards something I couldn't explain. The drive to the area took 25 minutes on the winding mountain roads. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but trees and empty asphalt. No other vehicles, no signs of life. Just the steady hum of the engine and the crunch of tires on fallen leaves. When I reached the turnoff for the camping area, I killed the headlights and coasted to a stop. The forest was silent, not the usual quiet of a mountain night, but something deeper. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant sounds of nocturnal animals. It was like the entire ecosystem had gone to sleep at once. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and started walking toward Campsite 12. I found their tent about a quarter mile down the trail. It was intact, but empty. The sleeping bags were still warm, like whoever had been inside had left just minutes before. Their gear was scattered around the site. Backpacks, cooking equipment, a lantern still burning. But no people. I called out, swept the area with my flashlight, but found nothing. No footprints leading away from the site, no signs of struggle. They had simply vanished. That's when I saw the glow. It was faint at first, filtering through the trees from the direction of Copper Ridge. Not the warm orange glow of a campfire, but something cooler, bluish-white, like moonlight reflected off snow. But there was no snow, and the moon was a thin crescent, barely visible through the canopy. I followed the glow, moving carefully through the underbrush, trying to stay quiet. The old mining road was overgrown and barely passable, but I could see tire tracks in the soft earth. Fresh ones. Someone else had driven this way recently, and not in a standard vehicle. The tracks were too wide, too deep, and they didn't have the tread pattern of any tire I'd seen before. They led straight toward the source of the light. As I got closer, the glow intensified. It wasn't coming from ground level, but from above, filtering down through the trees like artificial daylight. I could hear a sound now, too, a low, thrumming hum that seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath my feet. It wasn't mechanical exactly, more organic, like the breathing of something massive. I reached the edge of the old mining camp and stopped. What I saw there changed everything. There were 3 of them, hovering about 50 feet above the ground. They were massive, easily the size of city buses, but their shape was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Smooth, organic curves that seemed to shift and flow, even as they remained stationary. The bluish-white light emanated from their entire surface, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. And beneath them, scattered around the cleared area, where the old mine buildings used to stand, were people. They weren't the missing campers. These were different people, maybe 20 or 30 of them, standing in perfect rows facing the hovering craft. They were completely still, arms at their sides, heads tilted back, looking up at the lights. Some were dressed like hikers, others in regular clothes. A few wore uniforms, park service, maybe local police. They all had the same blank, peaceful expression, like they were listening to music only they could hear. I recognized one of them, Sarah Martinez, a fellow ranger from the Yellowstone district. I'd worked with her on a joint search and rescue operation last spring. She'd been missing for 2 weeks. Her family had organized search parties, put up flyers, contacted every law enforcement agency in 3 states. And here she was, standing motionless in an abandoned mining camp, staring up at objects that shouldn't exist. I stayed hidden behind a collapsed building, watching. The people below never moved, never spoke. They just stood there, bathed in that otherworldly light. Occasionally, one of the craft would descend slightly, and the light would intensify around a particular person. When that happened, the person would sometimes sway slightly, like they were dreaming while standing up. I don't know how long I watched. It could have been minutes or hours. Time felt different there, stretched and fluid. My radio was dead, my watch had stopped, and the normal rhythms of the night seemed suspended. But eventually, something changed. The craft began to rise, slowly and silently. As they did, the people below started to move, not walking exactly, but drifting toward a path that led deeper into the mountains. They moved in single file, still looking upward, following the ascending lights. Sarah was among them, her ranger uniform clearly visible in the fading glow. I wanted to call out to her, to run after them, but something held me back. Fear, maybe, or some deeper instinct that warned me not to interfere. Instead, I followed at a distance, staying in the shadows, trying to see where they were going. The path led to an area I'd never seen before, though I thought I knew every inch of this forest. It opened into a natural amphitheater, a bowl-shaped depression surrounded by towering rock walls. In the center was a pool of water, perfectly circular, and so still it looked like black glass. The craft hovered above it now, their light reflecting off the surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. One by one, the people walked to the edge of the pool and stopped. They stood there for a long moment, then simply stepped forward into the water. But they didn't sink. They didn't even cause ripples. They walked across the surface like it was solid ground, moving toward the center where the reflected light was brightest. When they reached the middle, they looked up one final time, then slowly faded from view. Not disappearing exactly, but becoming transparent until they were gone. Sarah was the last one. She paused at the water's edge and turned back toward the forest. For just a moment, I thought she was looking directly at me, though I was hidden in the darkness 100 yards away. She smiled, the first expression I'd seen from any of them, then stepped onto the water and walked toward the light. When she faded away, the craft began to rise again, higher this time, until they were just pinpricks of light against the star-filled sky. The humming stopped, the supernatural glow faded, and the forest returned to its normal nocturnal quiet. I was alone in the amphitheater, staring at a pool of ordinary water that reflected nothing but stars. I made my way back to the ranger station in a daze. The missing campers from Site 12 were there when I arrived, sitting in their car in the parking lot. They looked confused, disoriented, like people waking up from a deep sleep. They said they'd gotten lost on a night hike and had just found their way back. They couldn't remember much about the past few hours, just walking through the forest and seeing beautiful lights in the sky. I filed my reports the next morning, but I kept the details vague. Equipment malfunction, I wrote, atmospheric phenomenon. The missing campers were found safe and unharmed. I didn't mention the craft, the gathering, or what I'd witnessed at the pool. Who would believe it? More importantly, what would happen if they did? Sarah Martinez was never found. Her case remains open, listed as a missing person presumed dead. Her family held a memorial service last month. I attended, standing in the back, watching her parents and siblings grieve for someone I'd seen walk into impossible light just 6 months ago. I still work the night shift at the ranger station. The calls about lights in the forest come in maybe once a month now, always from the area around Copper Ridge. I log them. I respond when I can. But I don't go back to that amphitheater. Some doors, once opened, should be left alone. Sometimes, on clear nights, when the stars are especially bright, I'll step outside the station and look toward the mountains. I think about Sarah, about where she went, about what she might have found on the other side of that impossible water. I wonder if she's happy, if she's at peace, if she's become something more than human in a place beyond our understanding. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can hear it again, that low, thrumming hum drifting down from the peaks. It doesn't frighten me anymore. If anything, it sounds like an invitation, patient and eternal, waiting for the moment when I might be ready to accept it. But not yet. Not tonight. I still have work to do here, watching over a forest that holds secrets deeper than any mine shaft, mysteries more profound than any mountain. I keep the radio on. I answer the calls. And I remind myself that some things are meant to remain unexplained, at least for now. The forest keeps its secrets well, but it also keeps its promises. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars and the trees, Sarah Martinez walks on water that isn't water, in a light that isn't light, in a place that exists just beyond the edge of what we're ready to believe. I never thought I'd be the type to believe in any of this. I mean, I used to be the guy who rolled his eyes at those late-night documentaries about UFOs and alien abductions. I'd flip past them, shake my head, maybe even laugh a little. But that was before I started collecting these stories, before I realized how many people out there have experiences they can't explain, can't forget, and definitely can't talk about without getting those looks. You know the ones I'm talking about. That sideways glance that says, maybe you should see someone about that. The polite nod, followed by a quick change of subject. The slow backing away at parties when someone's had one too many and starts talking about the lights they saw over the lake last summer. I've been doing this show for a while now, and what started as curiosity has become something else entirely, something heavier. Because once you start listening, really listening, to these accounts, patterns emerge. Not the kind you'd expect from people making things up. No, these are the patterns of truth. The small details that don't serve any narrative purpose. The way someone's voice changes when they describe a particular moment. The tears that come from nowhere when they remember something they wish they could forget. Like Sarah, who called me last month. She didn't want to be on the show, didn't want her story recorded. She just needed to tell someone who might believe her. She was driving home from her nursing shift at 3 a.m. when she saw something impossible. A craft, silent and massive, hovering over the interstate like it was studying the late-night traffic. She pulled over, grabbed her phone to record it, and that's when it just vanished. Not flew away. Vanished. Like someone had erased it from the sky. But here's the thing that got to me. Sarah didn't call to convince me it was real. She called because she was scared. not of the craft, but of what it meant. If they're here, she said, if they've always been here, then everything I thought I knew about the world is wrong, and I don't know how to live with that. That's what these stories really are, aren't they? They're not about spaceships or little grey beings. They're about the moment when the comfortable boundaries of our reality suddenly feel paper-thin, when the night sky stops being a beautiful backdrop and becomes a question mark hanging over everything we think we understand. I think about Marcus, the park ranger from episode 3, who found those perfect circles burned into the grass. He went back to that spot every day for months, hoping to find some rational explanation, because the alternative, that something beyond our comprehension had touched his small corner of the world, was too much to accept. He never found his explanation, but he found something else, a kind of peace with not knowing, a willingness to live with mystery. Or Jennifer, the radio DJ who received those coded signals from somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. She spent years trying to decode them, convinced they contained some profound message for humanity. But maybe the message wasn't in the code itself. Maybe it was in the reaching out. The fact that something, somewhere, was trying to communicate across the vast emptiness of space. The more stories I collect, the more I realize they're all connected by this thread of longing. Not just the longing to understand what happened to them, but the deeper longing to know we're not alone. That this vast universe isn't just an empty stage for our small human drama. And maybe that's why these experiences happen at all. Not because we're being invaded or studied or harvested for our genetic material, but because consciousness calls to consciousness across the void. Because intelligence, wherever it originates, recognizes intelligence. Because the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we dare to imagine. And sometimes, just sometimes, that strangeness reaches out to touch us. I think about the children in these stories. How many of them drew pictures of beings with large eyes before they ever saw a movie about aliens? How they described floating through walls and traveling to places made of light. Their parents dismissed it as imagination, as dreams, as too much screen time. But what if it wasn't? What if children, with their minds still open to possibility, are simply more receptive to experiences the adult world has trained itself not to see? There's this moment that happens in almost every story I've collected. It's after the fear subsides, after the shock wears off. It's a moment of recognition, not of the beings or the craft, but of something deeper. A recognition that reality is far more complex and beautiful than we've been taught to believe. That we live in a universe teeming with mystery and possibility. The skeptics will say, these are all hallucinations, sleep deprivation, mass hysteria, misidentified aircraft, and maybe some of them are. But even if 99% of these accounts have conventional explanations, what about that 1%? What about the stories that resist every attempt at debunking? What about the physical evidence, the radar confirmations, the multiple witnesses? What about the quiet consistency across cultures and decades? The same descriptions from people who've never met, never compared notes, never had any reason to coordinate their stories. The same sense of awe mixed with terror. The same feeling of being seen, truly seen, by an intelligence that operates according to rules we don't yet understand. I used to think that if contact was real, if we weren't alone, it would be obvious. Ships landing on the White House lawn, aliens walking down Main Street, undeniable proof broadcast on every channel. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe contact is subtle, personal, transformative. Maybe it happens one person at a time, changing them in ways that ripple outward through families, communities, the collective human consciousness. Maybe we're in the middle of contact right now, not the dramatic Hollywood version, but something quieter and more profound. A slow awakening to the reality that we share this cosmos with other forms of consciousness, other ways of being, other expressions of the same universal force that sparked life on this small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star in an unremarkable galaxy. The government documents that have been released recently, the military footage, the official acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, they've changed the conversation, but they haven't answered the deeper questions. Who are they? What do they want? How long have they been here? And most importantly, what does their presence mean for us? I don't have those answers. I'm not sure anyone does. But I do know this. The people who've shared their stories with me, who've trusted me with their most profound and frightening experiences, they're not crazy. They're not attention seekers or hoaxers. They're people who've been touched by something extraordinary, something that challenges everything we think we know about our place in the universe. And in sharing their stories, they've given us all a gift, the gift of expanded possibility, the reminder that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than our daily routines suggest, that the universe is not a dead, mechanical clockwork, but a living, breathing mystery that occasionally reaches out to remind us of our cosmic citizenship. As I finish gathering these accounts, as I close this chapter of ET Diaries, I'm left with more questions than answers, but I'm also left with something else. Hope. Hope that we're part of something magnificent. Hope that consciousness in all its forms is connected in ways we're only beginning to understand. Hope that the universe is not indifferent to our existence, but actively engaged with it. To everyone who shared their story, thank you. Your courage in speaking up, in risking ridicule and disbelief, has created space for others to step forward. You've helped shift the conversation from whether these experiences are real to what they might mean. To those who are listening and have had experiences of your own, know that you're not alone. Your memories are valid. Your experiences matter. And somewhere out there, others have seen what you've seen, felt what you've felt, and carry the same questions in their hearts. The night sky looks different now. When I step outside and look up at the stars, I don't just see distant suns and empty space. I see possibility. I see mystery. I see a universe that's far more alive and aware than we've been taught to believe. Maybe that's what these experiences are really about. Not proving the existence of extraterrestrial life, but awakening us to the extraordinary nature of existence itself, reminding us that we live in a cosmos where consciousness and intelligence take forms we're only beginning to imagine. The stories continue. New witnesses come forward every day. The phenomenon persists, evolves, adapts, and we continue to watch, to wonder, to reach out across the darkness, hoping that something, somewhere, is reaching back. Until we meet again, keep looking up, keep questioning, keep wondering, because in a universe as vast and mysterious as ours, anything is possible. These encounters, these glimpses into a reality far more complex and mysterious than we've been led to believe, represent something profound happening to our species. We stand at the threshold of a new understanding, one that challenges every assumption we've held about our place in the cosmos. The individuals who have shared their experiences with us are not seeking fame or fortune. They are not looking for validation from a world that often dismisses their accounts as fantasy or delusion. They are simply bearing witness to a truth that is slowly, quietly, inevitably revealing itself to humanity. What strikes me most about these encounters is their consistency across time and geography. From the remote forests of the Pacific Northwest to the bustling suburbs of major cities, from the windswept plains of the Midwest to the ancient deserts of the Southwest, these beings are making themselves known. They are not arriving with fanfare or dramatic displays of power. Instead, they are engaging in what can only be described as a careful, measured introduction to our species. They seem to understand that humanity is not yet ready for full disclosure, for the complete revelation of their presence. So they work in the shadows, in the quiet moments between day and night, in the spaces where our modern world's noise cannot quite reach. The telepathic communications reported by so many experiencers suggest a form of consciousness that transcends our current understanding of intelligence and awareness. These beings appear to operate from a perspective that encompasses not just individual minds, but collective consciousness, planetary awareness, and perhaps even cosmic intelligence. When Sarah received that overwhelming download of information about Earth's environmental crisis, she wasn't just receiving data. She was being invited to participate in a larger conversation about the future of our world. The beings who contacted her seemed to understand the interconnectedness of all life in ways that our fragmented, specialized human knowledge has yet to grasp. The recurring theme of environmental concern in these encounters cannot be ignored. Time and again, witnesses report that these beings express deep worry about humanity's impact on Earth. They speak of the planet as a living entity, not merely a collection of resources to be exploited. They seem to view the current ecological crisis not as an inevitable consequence of technological progress, but as a symptom of humanity's disconnection from the natural world and our role as stewards rather than conquerors of our environment. This perspective suggests that these beings have a vested interest in Earth's well-being, perhaps because they understand the planet's role in a larger cosmic ecosystem that we have yet to comprehend. The transformative nature of these encounters also points to something remarkable. Nearly every person who has had genuine contact with these beings reports profound changes in their worldview, their priorities, and their understanding of reality itself. They speak of feeling more connected to nature, more aware of the subtle energies that flow through all living things, more conscious of their thoughts and emotions as creative forces in the universe. It's as if contact with these beings serves as a catalyst for human evolution, awakening dormant capacities within our consciousness that have been suppressed by centuries of materialistic thinking. The beings themselves appear to come from multiple species or civilizations, each with their own characteristics and purposes. The tall, ethereal entities that seem to specialize in consciousness expansion and spiritual awakening. The smaller, more technologically oriented beings who appear fascinated by human biology and behavior. The shadowy figures that move through our reality like living thoughts, observing and documenting our species' development. The luminous beings that seem to exist partially outside our physical dimension, appearing as orbs of light or energy that can manifest physical presence when needed. Each type of being seems to represent a different aspect of a larger phenomenon, a coordinated effort to study, understand, and perhaps guide humanity through this critical period in our evolution. What becomes clear from these accounts is that we are not dealing with random visits from curious extraterrestrials. This appears to be a systematic, long-term project involving multiple species working together toward common goals. The fact that so many experiencers report similar messages about humanity's potential, about our need to evolve beyond our current limitations, about our responsibility to Earth and to each other, suggests a coordinated effort to plant seeds of transformation in human consciousness. The timing of these increased encounters also seems significant. As our species faces unprecedented challenges, from climate change to social inequality to the potential for technological self-destruction, these beings are making themselves known to more and more people. They seem to be offering us alternative perspectives on these challenges, showing us that solutions exist if we can expand our consciousness beyond the narrow confines of our current paradigms. They are not here to save us from ourselves, but to remind us of our own capacity for wisdom, compassion, and transcendence. The subtle nature of their contact also reveals something important about their intentions. If these beings wish to dominate or control humanity, they clearly possess the technology and capabilities to do so. Instead, they choose to work through inspiration, through gentle guidance, through the gradual awakening of human consciousness to larger truths. They seem to respect our free will and our need to choose our own path forward. Their interventions are more like gentle nudges than forceful redirections,
more like whispered suggestions than shouted commands. This approach suggests a wisdom that comes from experience with consciousness evolution, perhaps from having guided other species through similar transitions. They understand that true growth cannot be imposed from the outside, but must emerge from within. They are not here to give us the answers, but to help us remember the questions we should be asking. They are not here to solve our problems, but to awaken us to our own problem-solving capacities. The experiences themselves often speak of feeling chosen or selected for contact, but not in a way that makes them feel special or superior. Rather, they describe feeling a sense of responsibility, as if they have been entrusted with information or experiences that they are meant to share with others. They become bridges between worlds, translators of experiences that exist beyond the normal range of human perception. Many report that their encounters continue throughout their lives, evolving and deepening over time as their understanding and acceptance grow. This suggests that contact is not a one-time event, but an ongoing relationship. The beings seem to be cultivating long-term connections with certain individuals, perhaps as part of a larger network of human contacts spread across the globe. These people become nodes in a growing web of awareness, each contributing their unique perspective and abilities to a collective awakening that is happening at the species level. The implications of all this are staggering. If these accounts are accurate, and the evidence suggests they are, then we are living through one of the most significant periods in human history.
We are witnessing the end of humanity's cosmic isolation and the beginning of our integration into a larger community of intelligent beings. We are experiencing the first stirrings of a transformation that will ultimately change everything about how we understand ourselves, our world, and our place in the universe. Yet this transformation is not being forced upon us. It is emerging from within our own consciousness as we gradually become ready to accept and integrate these larger truths. The beings who are making contact with us seem to understand that consciousness evolution cannot be rushed or imposed. It must unfold naturally, organically, as individuals, and eventually our entire species become ready for expanded awareness. The stories we have explored tonight represent just the tip of the iceberg. For every person who has shared their encounter publicly, there are likely dozens more who have had similar experiences but choose to keep them private. The phenomenon is far more widespread than most people realize, touching lives across every demographic and geographic boundary. It is a truly global awakening, though one that is happening quietly, person by person, heart by heart, mind by mind. As we consider the future implications of these encounters, we must ask ourselves what kind of world we want to create in response to this knowledge. How do we integrate the understanding that we are not alone in the universe? How do we respond to the environmental concerns that these beings consistently express? How do we evolve beyond our current limitations to become the kind of species that can participate constructively in a larger cosmic community? The answers to these questions will not come from governments or institutions, but from individuals like you and me, who are willing to open our minds to possibilities beyond our current understanding. The transformation that these beings seem to be encouraging is ultimately a personal one, though it will have collective implications. Each person who awakens to these larger truths becomes a catalyst for others, creating ripple effects that spread throughout our interconnected world. Perhaps most importantly, these encounters remind us that reality is far stranger, far more wonderful, and far more filled with intelligence and purpose than our materialistic worldview has led us to believe. We live in a universe that is alive with consciousness, teeming with beings who have evolved far beyond our current limitations, yet who still care about our development and well-being. We are not alone, we are not abandoned, and we are not without guidance as we navigate the challenges of our time. The beings who are making contact with us seem to see something in humanity that we often fail to see in ourselves. They see our potential for wisdom, for
for compassion, for transcendence of our current limitations. They see us as a species on the verge of a great awakening, capable of joining a larger community of evolved beings who work together for the betterment of all life in the universe. This is perhaps the most hopeful message that emerges from these encounters. Despite all of our current problems, despite the darkness that seems to pervade so much of our world, we are not doomed to destruction or stagnation. We are a species with incredible potential, guided by beings who have walked this path before us and who are willing to share their wisdom with us as we find our way forward. The quiet revolution of consciousness that these encounters represent is already underway. It is happening in the hearts and minds of individuals around the world who are awakening to these larger truths. It is spreading through networks of awareness that exist both online and offline, connecting people who have had similar experiences and who are working to understand their meaning and implications. As we move forward into an uncertain future, these encounters offer us both hope and guidance. They remind us that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, that our actions and choices matter not just for our own species, but for the entire web of life that connects all consciousness throughout the universe. They challenge us to rise above our petty differences and work together for the common good. They invite us to remember our connection to the natural world and our responsibility as stewards of the earth. Most importantly, they remind us that the universe is a place of infinite mystery and wonder, where consciousness takes forms we can barely imagine, and where intelligence operates on scales that dwarf our current understanding. We are witnessing the dawn of a new age for humanity, an age in which we will gradually take our place as conscious participants in the cosmic community of evolved beings.
The bedtime stories we have shared tonight are not just tales of strange encounters and mysterious beings. They are glimpses into our own future, previews of the reality that is slowly revealing itself to our awakening species. They are invitations to expand our consciousness, to open our hearts to possibilities beyond our current limitations, and to prepare ourselves for the extraordinary journey that lies ahead. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps you will dream of distant worlds and evolved beings, of consciousness that transcends physical form and intelligence that operates beyond the boundaries of individual minds. Perhaps you will sense the presence of those who watch over our world with loving concern, who guide our development with infinite patience, and who await our readiness to join them in the great work of consciousness evolution throughout the universe. The universe is vast and mysterious, filled with wonders beyond our current imagination. We are not alone in this cosmic dance of consciousness and evolution. We are part of a story that is still being written, a story of awakening and transformation that is unfolding across the stars. And tonight, as we close our eyes and surrender to the mystery of dreams, we can rest in the knowledge that we are loved, we are guided, and we are part of something infinitely beautiful and profound. As we draw these extraordinary accounts to a close, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of a new understanding about our place in the cosmos. Each story we've shared tonight represents more than just an individual encounter with the unknown. They are threads in a vast tapestry of contact that spans continents, cultures, and consciousness itself. What emerges from these testimonies is a picture of intelligence far beyond our current comprehension, operating with patience and purpose that transcends our human timescales. These beings, whether they originate from distant star systems or parallel dimensions, appear to be engaged in a careful, methodical process of awakening. They do not arrive with fanfare or demand our attention through dramatic displays of power. Instead, they work quietly, touching individual lives with experiences that forever change how we perceive reality. The patterns we've observed are remarkable in their consistency. Time and again, witnesses describe encounters during moments of solitude, when the busy chatter of daily life falls silent and consciousness becomes receptive to subtler frequencies of communication. These are not random events, but carefully orchestrated moments of contact that respect human free will while offering profound opportunities for growth and understanding. Perhaps most significantly, these experiences consistently emphasize our interconnectedness with all life on Earth and beyond. The environmental messages woven throughout these accounts suggest that our visitors possess a deep understanding of ecological systems and recognize the critical juncture at which humanity now stands. They seem to be offering guidance, not through force or coercion, but through the gentle expansion of awareness that comes from direct experience of cosmic consciousness. The transformations described by these witnesses follow remarkably similar patterns. Initial fear or confusion gives way to profound peace and understanding. Materialistic worldviews dissolve in the face of experiences that demonstrate the universe's deeper mysteries. Most importantly, these encounters instill a sense of responsibility, a recognition that we are not merely observers of cosmic events, but active participants in an unfolding story of consciousness evolution. The telepathic communications reported across these accounts suggest that these beings have moved beyond the limitations of spoken language to more direct forms of consciousness-to-consciousness contact. This points to our own potential for expanded awareness, hinting at dormant capacities within human consciousness that may be gradually awakening as we prepare for broader cosmic citizenship. The variety of beings described in these encounters suggests we are dealing with not one, but multiple intelligences, each perhaps playing a specific role in humanity's gradual introduction to galactic community. Some appear as teachers, sharing knowledge and expanding awareness. Others seem to be healers, working to restore balance both within individuals and in our relationship with the natural world. Still others appear to be observers, carefully monitoring our progress as we navigate this crucial period of planetary transformation. The timing of these increased encounters is particularly significant. As humanity faces unprecedented global challenges, from climate change to technological disruption to social upheaval, these experiences offer a broader perspective on our current circumstances. They suggest that what we're experiencing is not merely a series of random crises, but part of a larger evolutionary process that has been anticipated and is being carefully guided by intelligences that have successfully navigated similar transitions. The emphasis on environmental stewardship throughout these accounts cannot be overstated. These beings consistently communicate deep concern for Earth's ecological systems and seem to be working to awaken humanity to our role as planetary guardians rather than mere consumers of resources. This suggests that our environmental challenges are not just local concerns, but part of a cosmic responsibility that extends far beyond our immediate planetary boundaries. The subtle nature of these contacts also reveals something profound about the consciousness of our visitors. They demonstrate a respect for human autonomy and natural development that speaks to a highly evolved ethical framework. Rather than imposing their will or accelerating our development beyond sustainable levels, they work patiently to create conditions where human consciousness can expand naturally and authentically. For those who have not had such direct experiences, these accounts offer important insights into the nature of reality itself. They suggest that consciousness is far more fundamental than our current scientific paradigms acknowledge, and that the universe is alive with intelligence at every level. This perspective invites us to approach our daily lives with greater awareness, openness, and reverence for the mystery that surrounds us. The geographic distribution of these encounters, spanning rural farmlands, urban centers, wilderness areas, and suburban neighborhoods, indicates that this contact phenomenon transcends cultural and geographical boundaries. This suggests that the awakening process is truly global in scope, touching lives across all segments of human society as we collectively prepare for whatever lies ahead. As we conclude this collection of extraordinary testimonies, we're left with profound questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and our place in the cosmic order. These experiences challenge us to expand our understanding of what is possible and to remain open to forms of intelligence and communication that transcend our current scientific models. The witnesses who have shared their stories demonstrate remarkable courage in speaking about experiences that challenge conventional reality. Their willingness to share these profound encounters, despite potential skepticism or ridicule, suggests a deep recognition of the importance of these experiences for humanity's collective awakening. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, perhaps you'll find yourself more attuned to the subtle signs of contact that may be occurring all around us. These experiences remind us that we live in a universe far stranger and more wonderful than we typically imagine, filled with intelligences that watch over us with patient care and cosmic wisdom. The quiet revolution of consciousness these encounters represent is already transforming our world in ways both subtle and profound. As more individuals awaken to these broader realities, we move closer to a future where humanity takes its rightful place as conscious participants in the grand cosmic community that has been patiently waiting for our arrival. As we draw this cosmic tale to a close, remember that these encounters are not mere bedtime stories, but whispers from a reality far grander than we've dared imagine. Each sighting, each moment of connection at 3:17 a.m., each gentle touch of an otherworldly presence represents a thread in an intricate tapestry being woven across our planet. These beings, with their patient wisdom and profound understanding, are not here to conquer or control, but to guide us toward an awakening that has been millennia in the making. The consistency of these experiences across continents and cultures suggests something remarkable. We are not alone, and we never have been. These cosmic visitors have been watching, waiting, and slowly preparing us for a transformation that will expand our consciousness beyond the boundaries of our current understanding. Their environmental warnings, their messages of unity and interconnectedness, their gentle presence in our most quiet moments, all point toward a future where humanity takes its rightful place in a vast galactic community. As you close your eyes tonight, consider that somewhere in the darkness, these benevolent beings continue their patient work. They are helping us remember who we truly are and what we are capable of becoming. The next time you wake at 3:17 a.m. or catch a glimpse of something extraordinary in your peripheral vision, remember that you might be witnessing the next chapter of humanity's greatest adventure. The universe is calling, and slowly, gently, we are beginning to answer.